Hello, everyone. I hope that everyone's doing well. We are about 2/3 of the way through the semester, so we'll be getting to the end pretty fast. And you guys are well into working on your podcast assignment. So I wanted to do a little review and give you some uh, ideas, some tips, some things that maybe will help as you are trying to figure out what to say and how to put all this together. Please, 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 if you have not looked at the information, I'm in the podcast folder, the podcast assignment file that has the information about, um, the details about how to do the podcast assignment. So please review that. If you have not looked at that, and if you're not going by that, and you're just trying to guess, that's just not a good strategy. So please go ahead and use the information. And, I put this information here to help you. I added a list here about reviewing. You guys are going to be doing a review of the first drafts. And then, of course, when you turn in the final, you will get a final grade on the final version of your podcast. So I wanted to give you some more details about how to think about that. So here's some points to show you, what we're looking for. First of all, is it interesting? Think back to the podcast examples you found when we were starting on the podcast assignment. If you were, say, a guest, or if you were the host of that podcast and you were going to present what it is you've chosen to put into your script, would anybody want to listen? Would they find it interesting? Would they be able to understand and follow you? Would they know why you're doing this information? I want to encourage you to think about telling your podcast to this general audience. Pretty much anybody can come and listen to a podcast, right? So you have to really think about what you need to say to make everything clear. Now, people are going to come to podcasts based on whether they're kind of interested in what's being said, but still, you have to really explain what's going on. And you want to give them something that's interesting so that they don't just turn you off. So I would encourage you to look at what you've written so far in your script, or when you get your first draft, look back at it and think to yourself, if you were listening to that on one of the podcasts that you chose, how would that go? And try to think about it that way. Okay. Also, are you adding to the class discussions? Is it clear the connection you are making to discussions? You want to say, maybe chapter 6 of the book, but you have to give the full information. You have to say the title of the book, the author of the book, maybe even a little bit of what it's about, because these people listening have not been in our class. They're not going to know what we've talked about. They're not going to know what the assignment is. That's the way you have to think. So is it clear the connection you're making? Is it clear what you are adding to the conversations of what we've talked about in the class? One way to do this, if you're still kind of having trouble with this, what's something during the readings and anything that anybody posted, or any of all of the extra things that I give you guys, that you're not required to look at, but is there, because you can, any of that you can use, any of that you can connect to, and there's a lot of that in there that you could use for your content. This is not about you just saying what you like or what you think. You've got to have some real content for this. You've got to really be saying something and adding something, not just, oh, I think this would work and blah, blah, blah. That's not going to be useful to anybody unless you're like a known expert in this field. And as far as I know, nobody's identified to be that. So not to say you guys don't have good ideas, but that's not what this is about. So look at all of those things. What What was interesting to you? What would you want to say more about? What would you want to add more about? Maybe you have a question and you could find some information about the question you have and talk about that. And this next one, have you clearly given all the source info for any content you are sharing? So you can't just say our course textbook or our textbook by so-and-so. These people aren't in our class. And I've got that on the next one here. Is everything you say clear to the audience, which could be anyone? These people are not in our class. You can't say, when we talked about blah, blah topic. They're not going to know. If you want to, you can say in a class I took, we talked about blah, blah, blah. But you've got to think about this being said to just about anybody, and you've got to really make it clear. Now, I want to talk just a little bit, too, about what this assignment is not, because, and this isn't completely all of your fault, because so much that happens in education, the way assignments are presented, they're usually just for the teacher. Like, the teacher wants you to show you learned blah, 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 or the teacher wants you to give a test and talk about blah, 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 and just regurgitate information or whatever. So this is a very different end goal we have here. So this is not a report or an essay. This is not just pick a topic. Unfortunately, there's so much in education that's done that way. Just pick a topic, and I'm going to show you how to do X, Y, or Z. And that's not what this is about. This is about you adding to the conversation something that is interesting that connects to the content of what we've talked about. It's not a research paper. It's not a PowerPoint presentation. Notice I put blah. There's a great article out there called PowerPoint is Evil. You can Google it and find it. And just kind of read about all of the bad ways that PowerPoint can be used. And the unfortunate thing is, anytime I am working with students and I say, okay, we're going to do a presentation, and I try to not even use that word because it's become so cliched and so narrowly defined, unfortunately, by what's done to people in school, unfortunately. But if you say do a presentation, people just automatically default. It's like, okay, I'm going to do a PowerPoint. I presented at a conference on Friday, an online conference, and I got so tired of going through and hearing, and these are PhD level students and then fully people who have been teaching for a long, long time, full professionals in their area, experts, etc. But I got so tired of just listening to people read off of their PowerPoints. So it's just used so wrong in so many ways. This is not a boring stand in front of the class presentation. And I'm sure you've been in classes where that's kind of the model. Okay, everybody has to stand up and do a presentation, and the rest of us have to sit here and be bored to tears while we listen to them. It's not in the fill in the blanks of what the teacher is asking. It's not try to guess what I want you to say. It's not like a test at the end of class where here's a question and you're going to repeat something that was in the book or something that I gave you notes on or whatever. And it's definitely not a rehash of something from another class. Yeah, you can make connections to other class. You can make connections to just about anything, but this has to connect to something we really talked about and covered and were focused on in the class. And technically, if you just do a rehash of something from another class, that sort of falls under the that bigger, broader definition of what plagiarism is. So I'm not saying, you can't use any knowledge, from something you've learned, but it's got to have a real connection. It's not like, okay, this is a topic I covered, and so I've got some information about it, so I'm just going to kind of rehash it and put it in this podcast. Because technically that's just wrong on a lot of levels. So anyway, think about, is it interesting? If you're just going to repeat some points from the book or something like that, how is that going to be interesting to anybody? you got to add something to it. You got to extend the discussion. You've got to add to the discussion. So anyway, please, as you have questions, post those questions. Please look at all of the things that I have given you extra, the stuff, that's more than just the things you have to do. Because there's so much other stuff that we just don't have time to get to. And that's why I put it down as, the extra information. But you can look in there. There's all kinds of stuff in there that you could pull from and talk about. I'm not expecting you to go out and spend hours and hours and hours, trying to find a certain number of sources. Like, I haven't even said you have to use how many sources. You could use just one. But the point is not how many, but how are you going to make your discussion interesting? Do you need to refer to 2 or 3 other sources of information for what you're talking about? Maybe you need to. Maybe for your purposes, one is enough. Now, if you do an interview, and some of you have asked, can we do interviews? Yes, you can do interviews. But if you just ask a question and the interviewer has an answer and that's all you do, how boring again is that to the audience? You're going to have to think about when people do interviews, how do they do that? There's a lot of context that they give. They still cover background. They still talk about and explore the answers, and there's back and forth. I think there's kind of this assumption that, that's easy. I'll just ask questions. But it's really not just that. It's really not easy, and you don't have a lot of time. So that's the other thing I would think that would make doing an interview is difficult. Now, usually in shorter podcast settings or any kind of setting, if there's someone else that the person sharing is going to talk to, sometimes they might just ask one question or 2 questions, or it might be just a part of what they bring in, a short blurb here or there. So, I'd think more that way. And I'd really encourage you guys that are kind of looking at similar topics, that really, if you get in there and talk to each other, you're kind of doing an interview sort of a thing anyway. And to me, that would be easier, because if you get together and combine what you're doing, and you don't have to spend a lot of time meeting. The way I envision it is you would work on what it is you want to say. You'd have your podcast stuff written, but then, and then you don't have to even have as much if you're working with a group, right? You don't have to fill in 10 minutes. If you're working as a group, you can talk back and forth with each other and connect what you're doing and ask questions of each other. I just see all kinds of advantage to that. But anyway, it's not a requirement, because I know what happens when you make that a requirement. Some people, their head will explode. And unfortunately, that kind of work is not presented very well in school either. So anyway, I can't reteach you everything right now. So I'll get off of that. But anyway, hopefully this helps. I just wanted to throw some things out there, hopefully to clarify some. If you need me to meet with you, I'm happy to do that. Keep posting questions. I'll respond to those as quickly as I can. And I'm looking forward to some great work. You guys have done really well so far. So just keep thinking and use these review points that I've given you to help you with that. Okay, thanks a bunch.